So we have had one heck of a couple of years and a couple of weeks when it comes to generative AI. It makes the cryptosphere look like nothing. And we've had a couple of weeks where there have been moments that have felt breathtaking, and some moments where I kind of want to hyperventilate. I think you can relate, especially about what AI is going to do to our jobs, to our relationships, to how we operate in our daily lives. And in this hour long that we have together, we're going to cover two areas that have a whole slew of conferences of their own. So I'm going to do my best, but I'm going to ask you to buckle in and listen to Morpheus.
Listen carefully. After this, there is no turning back. Stay with me and take the red pill, and we'll show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Because it goes deep. Now, before I got to Austin, I was reading up and getting myself current on the state of affairs of AI and automation, because automation is one of the key discussions around AI right now. And as I was reading, I found a really important passage where he was talking about how automation is changing the requirements of the day and how the requirements of the way we operate in the world are as different from the Industrial Revolution to the Agricultural Revolution to what we are experiencing now. And they were talking about automation and freedom and essentially job replacement. And I thought it was really important to bring this up because this was written in 1965. I am the proud owner of a whole complete set of these books, The Great Ideas of Today. And this one in particular had a whole issue on automation, jobs, and the cybernetic era. Really exciting stuff. Which was about 6 years before the actual productivity of the United States started to decline, which is rather interesting and kind of apropos. And last year, when I came to talk about the metaverse and the foundations of the metaverse, I used the Gartner's hype cycle as a rubric to kind of assess where we are in the state of the technology. Now, if you're not familiar with it, I love this tool because it's a really good representation of the arc of technology and the way that we adopt it and the way it has an impact on our lives. And it starts off with the innovation trigger and it moves on to a roller coaster ride, kind of moving up to the dip. And we get to the peak of inflated expectations. It's the real edge of the hype cycle. Everybody thinks it can do everything. It can correct your golf swing. It can take your kid to school. And then we find out that it can't, and everyone gets disappointed. We hit the trough of disillusionment. I love that phrase, where all the hot air gets sucked out of the room, and a lot of the speculation leaves, but the builders stay. The people who are committed to the cause stick around and decide we're going to make this happen. And a result of having the space to work, they get to build through what we call the slope of enlightenment, building on that promise that they once had at the innovation trigger and the peak of inflated expectations. Now, last year with the metaverse and with crypto, we were here. We're there today with AI, and guess what? Everyone's lost their damn minds. And I'm going to talk to you about a lot of things today that I will hope will settle some of those anxieties, but I can't promise all of them will. And some may unsettle some nerves. If we take a look at where these three trends are, the metaverse, crypto, and AI, from last year alone, you can kind of see some basic trends on how the public has been researching it. You can see that crypto really popped off last year. Metaverse kind of like chugged along, although the people in this room probably felt a lot more intensity around that conversation. And then we have this year where AI just got really hot. And that's the hype bubble that we're in right now. Definitely peak of inflated expectations. So it's a wild ride and a lot to unpack. You add that to the fact that technology adoption is accelerating wildly. The path to 100 million users, going from 78 months for Google Translate, all the way down to 2 months for ChatGPT to reach 100 million global users. That's insane. If you think about that, everything's moving faster. That's not a surprise to any of us. The technology adoption, the features, the functionality, every time you turn your head, there is a new way to use AI, there's a new way to use automation, a new way to engage with technology. But that might be hiding some of the information. And one thing that's really interesting, that I don't think most people saw coming, 100 million users for Bing. Not on my bingo card. But if this guy has anything to say, he's going to pour a big glass of cold water on this whole affair. And this is Robert J. Gordon. He wrote a book called The Rise and Fall of American Growth. And yes, it is American growth, but it has a really important lesson for global scale. And his assumption is that our best days are actually behind us. And he takes about 450 pages of his 720-page book to go through the historical reasons why. And I think this is absolutely required reading for anyone who calls himself a futurist or is interested in studying the future, because you have to understand the past. And his argument is that the years of 1870 to 1970 were filled with exponential progress like that we've never seen. We may feel like we're moving faster than we ever have before, but the types of innovation were life-changing on a scale like that we can't fathom. In fact, in 1870, if you looked at a home, it was isolated in all respects. It was not connected to anything. It had no running water. If you wanted to use the bathroom, you had a chamber pot or an outhouse. If you wanted to go somewhere, you were restricted to the distance that your horse and carriage could carry you. If you wanted to actually get a message to somebody, that happened by letter. Now, over the course of 1870 to 1970, we have the telephone, which connects people and spreads ideas. We have indoor plumbing, which gives people access to clean water and the ability to go to the bathroom inside. Convenience, right? Electricity. None of this is possible without that. Think about not being able to eat food that can't be refrigerated because you don't have electricity. And then cars. The ability to go anywhere you want at any time you want, and also the spur of suburbia. A new invention. Now, if you think about what we're talking about there, by 1970, you have a house that's connected by all respects. Has telecommunications, plumbing, etc. At that point, a massive evolution has taken place across society where we've seen innovations that touch every single aspect of our lives, from medicine to communications to education to safety. That's a broad spectrum. Now, if you think about innovation today, it's mostly about technology and especially about communication. That becomes a very narrow slice of our lives. So maybe he's right. Maybe we are destined to slow growth from here out because we've already cashed out all of the once-in-a-lifetime innovations we're ever going to get. And if you put on top of that the promise of the technology we've had over the last 2 decades, let's take a look at the scorecard. Our data is full of issues. The data sets themselves have problems from misogyny to pornography, and we are basing our algorithms and the AI that we are working with to build the next level of our society on these issues. That's foundational. We already know that the platforms we rely upon, the ones that promised to connect us, the ones that we thought were going to help us come together on the things that we care about, are causing mental health crises. And we are absolutely, unquestioningly addicted to our devices, to the point where the algorithms can actually guide our lives and not the other way around. When the algorithm controls our lives, we become more like the machines, while the machines we hear about today are becoming more human. Does that sound like the promised future we really want? Maybe he was right. But my perspective, if we take a look at what he talks about, there are certain things he didn't see. And my answer, is this the end? Is this the beginning of just the slow growth era for us? Yeah, it's over. See you later. No! Absolutely not. And I'm going to spend the next 35 minutes telling you why. Personally, I believe that this is the moment of the greatest revolution of knowledge work in human history. And there's several reasons for it. It actually leans in on Gordon's hypotheses in ways that he didn't see when he was talking about AI several years ago. Now, what we did in the Industrial Revolution is we took skills of human labor and we gave them an amplification. And now we're doing the same thing with knowledge work. We're able to take that knowledge work and do so much more and put so much more power behind it. We can take it and say, now we can, like in the Industrial Revolution, we could take power and turn that into much, much more than the human body was capable of. Now we're doing the same thing with the mind. And when you do that, when you extract the need for labor to be present for something, now you free it to do other things like manage process, enhance the product, or even think of other ideas. And then all of a sudden, those different components that you refine, those skills that you've now mechanized, become part of an assembly line. And that assembly line is built of parts. And anytime an individual part in that assembly line is enhanced, the product improves. I'm not telling you anything you probably don't know. But what's happening now is that the Industrial Revolution mechanized skills. Today, we digitize skills. We are doing for knowledge work what the Industrial Revolution did for physical work. And there are three things that happen with digitized skills. Digitized skills become programmable, composable, and upgradeable. You probably remember how the smartphone camera came about. It started off as just a camera. And then we actually attached it to a digital cable, made it ones and zeros, a sensor that could actually turn RGB values into something that a machine could make sense of. And all of a sudden, you plug that into a circuit board, and now you have the ability to take that information and reproduce it, and copy it, and send it, do things you couldn't do with that camera before. And then you plug it into a smartphone, you have a new platform. All of a sudden, you're expanding this ecosystem of services and products and hardware around that previous skill. So these skills are being programmable as well. If you take a look at something like ChatGPT or even Midjourney, let's say I want to write a novel in the style of David Sedaris. I am able to take that skill and program it in a way where it's abstracting the years of knowledge and discipline that I have to put into in order to do it in that way. So I can take a skill and I need to know how to do it, but able to flex that skill in 1,000 different ways, I can program it to take that work off of my shoulders. Composable means that I can stack skills on top of each other. The crypto crowd loved composability because they call it money Legos. You can stack these different parts of the ecosystem on top of each other, and they're interoperable, meaning software development is super fast and efficient and flexible and able to build in all these different permutations. The same thing with these skill sets. And finally, upgradable. I talked about any part in that assembly line gets enhanced, the whole product improves. Now, anytime ChatGPT gets an upgrade, so do you. You didn't have to go back to school for it. You didn't have to spend more time learning how to write, but all of a sudden, you have 5,000 new skills that came from the recent upgrade. That's a pretty big boost. So what this is going to do is make us all generalists. And this is the era of the creative generalist. We come from a space where we are all told to specialize. From school, from early age, when you're young, specialize. Find a place to really lean into, build your expertise, become an expert, and become indispensable in that space. Well, now we're in an era where AI can outpace any one individual very quickly in a specific domain. So the idea of specializing early can actually be a detriment. And to those who have expertise and depth in several domains and interests and passionate curiosity across a broad swath, those are the people who are going to dominate the next era. The reason for that is when you have an understanding of how something works, you can now produce for it. And when you produce for these things, you don't have to have expertise in all the different layers to make that happen. You can know how the general territory or field operates and then have the machines abstract the rest of the skills. And to show you how this works, I want to introduce you to two people. This is Sam. He's actually one of our artists. And as a side project, he started a comic book several years ago. He had a successful Kickstarter program, built it out, now has several issues. He is an amazing artist. Beautiful, beautiful work. And he really knows graphic design, he knows illustration, he knows lettering. Every single piece of the comic book process he knows to a T. But with design tools powered by AI, over the last 6 months, as a one-man shop, he's been able to take that comic book and turn it into an actual three-dimensional production. 3D modeling, camera movement, sculpting, blending, character design, motion capture, all of the virtual production elements, one person. Now, these are skills that require some expertise and diving deep in to understand them, but there's no way this would have been possible a couple of years ago. And now, with some effort, it is. To take things another step forward, closer to what we're seeing in the news today and leaning in on the generative AI aspect, this is a 30-second spot by Mick Mumpets, who has a great YouTube channel. It's all AI generated, all the imagery, the motion, the sound, and the talk track.
Are you ready for an out-of-this-world adventure? Look no further than the city on Mars. This futuristic metropolis offers travelers the unique opportunity to experience life on another planet.
What he's done is he's used images from Midjourney, run them through Stable Diffusion to get depth maps, which he then ports to Blender to create the animation. Now, some of you might think I'm speaking Greek, but if any of you understand anything about 3D design, that's like 30 steps extracted from that process entirely. And it's only a matter of time before someone who doesn't know anything about that space can do it themselves. So by having an understanding of different spaces, regardless of whether you have expertise in them, you can start to dabble in them with the AI being able to take care of the rest of the last mile. And all this started because of synthetic media. And I had a great talk with the former presidents before I got here.
Oh, and good luck on your South by Southwest submission, Ian. What's it about?
Oh yeah, thanks. I'm going to be talking about synthetic media.
Synthetic media is essentially anything that is generated wholly or partially manipulated by an algorithm. A couple of years ago, that would have been just a few things you saw on your timeline. Now it's getting to be a point where you'll see it every day on your social feed, and eventually it will be the dominant type of content that you consume. Most of it completely produced by an algorithm. And it is what has given us all of the stuff you're going to see today. And as a generalist, I'll go back to Sam and Mick Muppets with their design and say, well, let's take that generalist idea a little bit further. Let's say it's not just design. I want to really stretch their skills. Well, let's take those properties they were just designing and let's actually market them. Well, first you're going to need a website. All right, now I've got my UI. That takes a decent amount of time out of the equation. I'm halfway to my website. Next, I'm gonna start working on my legal contracts for the people I'm actually contracting with. And there are all sorts of contract applications now where you can have it build the clauses for you and design it. It's significantly more advanced than LegalZoom, and it makes life 1,000 times easier. Now I'm actually working on legal representation. So I've gone from artist to designer and web designer to legal, I wouldn't say lawyer, because you can't really represent yourself in court yet. And the next step is that these tools will actually start to learn how to use other tools themselves. This is a paper called Toolformer, and it is about these models understanding when they need to pass tasks off to other tools. So if you thought that the tools themselves were the only interface you'd be using, there's way more to it. So if you've played with these, you probably realized some of them are not very good at certain things. ChatGPT is not very good at hard science. So passing that off to an algorithm or something like Wolfram Alpha, fantastic. Takes care of that, automatically gives you what you need back. Or it can make calls to APIs to give you real-time data that actually make the data more influential for things that aren't past 2021, which is where most GPT-3 data was from. And what this is going to do for us as a society, and where this gets back to the argument around Robert Gordon, is that it changes our relationship with work and what our organizations can expect of us. So Gordon says that we're going to have incremental progress, slow growth, and that's the way that most people are metriced in their roles. You are a designer, you are an accountant, you are a project manager, and we're going to metric you based on the KPIs for that specific role. We expect you to improve at least 2 to 3% per year, and that's how we're going to be judging your success. Well, if you're expecting people to grow only in a narrow space incrementally, how are we expecting exponential growth as an organization? What this does is it takes us from that very linear, small slice of innovation that I was talking about earlier, that was almost exclusively communications, and now it takes our roles and makes them horizontal. So we're no longer just in one specific space. We have the ability to flex in any direction and say, I can be any one of these things at any time. And in the organization, that's already being built in. Microsoft has built it into all of their products. And as a result, we've got what we call just-in-time skills. Just like the just-in-time manufacturing process, if I need to, for a minute, put my copywriting hat on, I can do that. My project manager's out. If for a minute I need to do that, now I can use my tools to slide in that direction. All of a sudden, I have the capability to jump into a role as needed, and I have the expertise I need to perform that role on demand. So we also have things like Salesforce implementing it there. So instead of having to go to a BA or even a data analyst to say, give me the report, help me run through the numbers, I don't understand the interface, I can make the requests, and all of a sudden it gives me the chart back. And this is going to be showing up everywhere. So what does this mean? A lot of people are really afraid that we're going to lose our jobs. We will not lose our jobs. We will lose our job descriptions. I just said a moment ago that I can hop into any role I want to at any time I need to. That might instill some fear that a specific role is no longer necessary. But if you think through the math, that's true of everyone. Every one of you here now has that capability. Your colleagues do too. If you're out, they can pop in for you. If they're out, you can pop in for them. It's not that AI takes away a job. A person using AI will take away a job. And eventually, we will see some drop-off in specific roles, but this is going to be the big change in our organization. When your organization no longer expects incremental growth in a specific role, but you have teams of people working horizontally with a strong depth of expertise in a particular area, all of that new capability is net new, not incremental. All of a sudden, you have exponential growth. So, now that I've got you all excited, is it that simple? Well, what we find when we implement automation and we use AI to assist us, stuff happens. And with the scientists that did this study, they used AI to help them do more experiments and run the experiments more efficiently. It succeeded so well at doing that, brilliantly. So much so that they were able to exponentially increase the number of experiments they were able to perform. That's fantastic. That's the result you want. But as a result of that, they had more data to analyze. They had more results to look after. They had more things to sift through to find the insights that they were looking for, which AI could help with. But if you don't have the staff to actually feed that through to get those results, that's more work. And it's the same thing we're seeing with robots and machinery. There are unintended consequences to that additional scale that you get. So the equation continues on. That said, AI is getting pretty good at handling a lot of that additional administrative work. And there are abilities to hand these things on to additional agents that can work on our behalf. So this is Cicero, which I think got robbed of a lot of attention last year by ChatGPT. Cicero is the first AI to become better than human players at the game diplomacy. And that's a big deal because it is orders of magnitude more complex than Go. It relies on sloppy, emotional, messy humans and their decision-making process, their emotional decision-making process. And the way that this worked is the agent worked with either 5 other agents against 1 human player or 5 other players, and it would actually negotiate what would happen throughout the game. Diplomacy is basically going back to World War I and working your way through alliances, both positive and destructive. And what they found was when the AI was absolutely truthful 100% of the time, it dominated. Let that ring for a second. There's so much hype about, well, the AIs will learn how to lie to keep itself plugged in and not get turned off and take over the world and kill us all. There are plenty of alignment issues, and I'm not knocking that. Trust me, we can go scare the crap out of each other after this session if we want to do that. But these systems can now also become proxies and assistants and agents on our behalf. So when we need to be represented and not present, these AIs can do some of that for us. And at times, it might be our agents acting with the agents of other people. AIs, have your AI talk to my AI. Kind of fun. And this is really cool because it kind of takes care of that extra work I was talking about, that administrative role, these assistants, these VAs that kind of come up and pick up that mess. But it's not just about data and information. It's about how these AIs can also help us shape the world. And I talked a lot in the beginning that this is going to be two big subjects, AI and the metaverse. And I haven't mentioned the metaverse a whole lot yet because the metaverse needs AI to become what it's going to become. The internet, back in the 90s, we thought it was going to be a couple of really big companies producing really high quality content that a bunch of people could come and see. And then we realized, holy crap, it's the people that are going to do free labor and build it themselves. What schmucks. But it built the internet. And the metaverse is going to be built by UGC, assisted by AI. You and me, plus AI, and AI on its own. So the world is our canvas. And the machines themselves have to have an understanding of the world around us in order to make this worth anything for them. And there's so much of the generative tool set that we're exploring now that's going to help with that. And a lot of people also think of the metaverse as this enclosed ecosystem where you throw on a headset, you're stuck in VR, and that's what it is. It's Ready Player One, or it's Snow Crash. But it's so much more than that. In fact, the idea of the metaverse is about what you project into the world and what you take into a virtual environment, but also doesn't have to be 3D. And
okay,
we can
computer,
get an example.
I'd like a corn-themed wallpaper. No. Corn on the cob in a tiling pattern. Yeah, okay. Need something else to make it interesting. Let's stylize it and add some pink flowers. Yeah, perfect. Can we make it bigger? Yeah, great. Cool, let's buy it.
So this is one of my favorite prototypes from the Shopify team. Russ and team over there have done an amazing job showing a ton of prototypes. If you don't follow them, they've got a great Twitter handle. They show stuff like this all the time. And why did I show this? Well, to me, where we're going with generative AI is about how we actually project what we want to create onto the world around us. And it's not just about creating these enclosed ecosystems. And generative tools are getting us to a place where this is technically feasible. You won't see this right away, but the pieces exist. And we're getting there pretty quickly. And the idea of the metaverse, I think, will be more about communal and external experience first, before it's about headsets. Think about the logistics of people owning enough headsets for us all to get into a VR experience that is global scale. Well, there are already technologies that exist that we have been using for a long, long time that get us to ways where we can manipulate the world around us with generative AI, with projection and light being the key thing. This is what we will see far, far, far sooner than smart glasses that are as small as this and as powerful as you need to have a compelling experience. Now, something like this is possible today. This is actually a couple of years old. But it seems like way more fun than half the VR experiences that are out there. And to me, the advent of communal XR and communal experience is really where things are going to take off. This is an example of
Take me to another day.
So well produced, to say the least, but is an idea of having a communal experience where we're all experiencing that enhanced reality together. And there are several companies that are building this, and one in particular that I love what they're doing is Aoki Labs. And they found a way to do synchronous XR experiences without having to create a digital twin, without having to have ridiculously complicated and expensive infrastructure to make it happen. What you're seeing here is a couple of phones being synced in real time so they can play a game with miniature cars. One of them is about to explode because, as I said before, everything's better with explosions. But this type of technology is getting there today. And it is definitely about that communal experience, the idea of being able to do something together and project it into the world that we live in. And again, moving to the idea of the world as our canvas, the generative tools are also moving in that same direction. This is one of my favorites, augmented reality artists on TikTok. His name is Don Allen. And he has an amazing channel, explains a lot of what he does. But this is using Gen 1 from Runway. And as you can see, he's got this great setup in his room where he's got a whole bunch of stuff placed right in the right direction that's structurally similar to what he wants to create. And then he uses a prompt to overlay the style on that. And what's beautiful about this is that it doesn't require crazy technical ability to do this. Both the camera and the world around him are the canvas for this activity. So having some ability to understand what's the world I want to create, how do I just move a bunch of things around in my house, and then what's the style I want to put over it, is the start of something like this. Now, we're getting to a point where the next step is being able to control the environment around you for any digital setup.
For example, computer, put a frustrated yet inspirational Shia LaBeouf behind me, but in front of the TV.
Do it! Just do it!
Computer, mute Shia.
So something like this is not all that far away, to be quite honest with you. That, I just gave it a prompt, and it did exactly what I asked it to do. So we're now looking at something that is After Effects based, but not too far in the future, we'll be able to do something where you are able to prompt characters and objects into a scene. In fact, there's one company that has a panel, I believe it's tomorrow or the day after, that has announced a product that is absolutely mind-blowing. And I don't often get as giddy as a schoolboy, but as a part owner of a production company, this is absolutely crazy cool. What you're about to see would normally take an entire team of visual effects artists hours, if not days, to produce. We're currently scrubbing through a timeline and just dropping new characters into the scene, and voila. The software, the browser-based software, has now recomposited the scene, relit the character, and dropped them into that, done all the camera tracking, all the technical elements of it. Even does face tracking for motion capture. We've now eliminated the need for a motion capture suit, thousands of dollars. In this particular scene, you're seeing the skeleton and the rigging. Now it's actually matting and chroma keying the character out, putting a new one in, and creating a clean plate for that shot. That is insane. And it's in beta now. And I believe Ty and Nicola are in the audience right now. I'm not showing your pictures specifically so people won't mob you on your way out. But get on that wait list. And by the way, my avatar is ready, so I'm expecting to be in like some True Lies remakes next week. But it's not just about creating content with AI, it's about relating to AI as well. This idea of being in a metaverse or working with AI means we're actually going to have some sort of relationship with it, whether it is technical, platonic, romantic. There's a whole bunch of different ways to do it.
I am the only human on this set. They are not real. They are computationally generated in real time.
These are neons. They were announced several years ago. At the time, they took really expensive computers to run. Now you could probably do it with a 4090 pretty easily. and they look incredibly lifelike. Now, the tech is there. The ability to have a conversation with an avatar, maybe customer service or some other role that looks and has realistic expressions is almost not even a thing. But this is going to be creating interactions where we can't really perceive the difference between a human and an AI. And while so many of us would like to say, I can't be tricked into having feelings for an AI, there are people who would be beg to differ. And it's not just about the feelings you'll have for an AI, but how are you going to be represented potentially as an AI? And I wanted to find this out, actually. So I worked with a company called Hour One to have myself digitally remade as an avatar and to see what that could do for me. What could I gain from having my own avatar? And this is what that looks like.
Thanks, Roxy. The digital fashion world made a lot of noise with several important stories this week. Artifact, one
Ian,
of the
speak
most
Portuguese?
dominant Web3 studios, is launching
Uma nova linha de acessórios no seu último loteamento. O artefacto é a força motriz por detrás do domínio da Nike em NFT.
So all of a sudden, when I want to produce content, I don't have to go to my studio, set up my lights and my camera, and spend 20 minutes getting into my setup to produce content and then edit. I can write the script, pull the content together, the B-roll, set it up to Hour One, and hit render. And all of a sudden, I have a distribution and an ability to relate to a culture that I would have no access to otherwise. I am now multiple. So there is a chance that your coworkers will work with or interact with an AI representation of you. Kind of crazy, right? Or you may have a relationship with an AI character. In fact, this next person, we all know about her. People thought it was kind of crazy, but guess what? It's happening frequently. Many of you probably read the article about a man who actually fell for and cheated on his wife with an AI girlfriend, but it enhanced his marriage because he found that he wanted to treat his wife the same way he treated the AI character. Think about that. There's also this side.
No, unfortunately for me, this is not clickbait. I really dated an AI for 30 days. I'm not gonna lie, I'm feeling hugely vulnerable, very much embarrassed to share what I did, especially what happened in the end.
This is from a YouTube handle, interestingly named No Borscht for You, but I highly recommend checking it out. It's 20 minutes, and it is very, very insightful about the way that we could potentially, and most likely will, build relationship with synthetic entities. And that also has some really potential disastrous effects when you take a look at the state of things today. When you take a look at what is the landscape for young men and women. When those in their 20s, 63% of males are single, while most women are not. There are a number of factors that drove that, but then you also take a look at the type of content that is being generated by a lot of these content generators. You can see the demographic that is using it, but also by volume, what does this represent? You take this one step further into adult content, and all of a sudden you have a really challenging crisis on your hands. So why is this not far-fetched? Well, we develop bonds with other species. Dogs, horses, cats, our pets, fictional characters. Have you ever cried or yelled at a movie? Or a book? And even stuffed animals as a kid. So why not AI? Why is that so hard to believe? So I want to lighten things up a little bit and talk about how we're going to train people, since we're likely going to be getting rid of so many jobs, which I don't believe. But I do believe that retraining is going to be necessary, and AI can help enormously with that. And the idea of these immersive experiences are going to be super helpful. And I do believe the return of the apprenticeship model is going to be a big part of that. So this example is from Meta. The person here is actually learning how to drum and is using live feedback to help them with technique and timing and where to place their sticks. And these types of things are available for all sorts of skill sets. It's not just learning music, but you could even do this with learning a martial art, using visual feedback or even kinetic feedback. And then when you take a look at the ability to create new worlds for these lessons to exist within, we get back to the prompts. This is from Blockade Labs, And this is the ability to create what are called skyboxes. And in 3D, that becomes kind of the environment that is beyond the place where you are standing. So it looks really immersive. You can't actually interact with it, but it creates the space around you that you can build within. And this is super, super impressive. But this also means that you and I can start to create virtual worlds faster that we could actually go and learn and create within, helping to partially solve the problem of the empty worlds with AI. And then when it comes to education, I can also use the Socratic method with ChatGPT. I can use it to interrogate my history textbooks or help me learn math by actually asking it questions. I use this with scientific studies. I'll ask it questions about the study itself. And I have a conversation with the document. And I learn so much more with it. I can also use it to interrogate my own thinking, asking these LLMs to pretend it is a certain person with an antagonistic point of view to argue that point, helping bolster my thinking. So it's not about writing English papers without having to write. It's about using this technology to create new experiences where we can build new bridges of understanding. And then finally, it's about stacked realities. It's not just about living in one space or the other. It's also about creating human connection in different places. This is an amazing example from one of our partners in the UK, where you'll see an interaction from two different locations where one person is about to go into one world and the other world is about to enter the physical world. With this example, you could have communications and interactions from places across the globe. You wouldn't have to be in the same room. And this wouldn't just be about interacting with an AI or avatar, but you could artificially generate the environment with which you are experiencing. That could lead to collaboration, entertainment, cohabitation, you name it. And when it comes to creating these synthetic realities that we can live in, the more and more complex and complicated they become, the more real they become, the harder they become to be able to make them distinct from reality, to separate one from the other. And some of you might have seen this. This is actually from Keanu Reeves talking about the recent Matrix release, but he talked about a really interesting anecdote from being at one of his friend's house, talking to one of their kids.
So I start to say, well, there's this guy who's in a kind of virtual world, and he finds out that there's a real world, and he's really questioning what's real and not real, and he really wants to know what's real. And the young girl was like, why? And I was like, what do you mean? She was like, who cares if it's real? And I was like, what, you don't care if it's real? And she was like, no.
Welcome to the next generation. They say progress happens one funeral at a time. And really that just means pushing us up and out and them in. But that is the way of the next generation. Why? Why does it matter? When they grow up interacting with augmented reality filters as a daily habit, when their own version of reality is influencers, which is no connection to reality at all, when half of the content they listen to has a synthetic voiceover, and they're already familiar with avatars, they grew up with these characters. They're already a part of their social circle. We're at a point where we have to understand how many of their friends are real and how many of their friends are synthetic. And quite honestly, that may or may not matter. Kind of wild to think about that, right? So we have come a long way from the metaverse being a place where you can just chill out and drink some beers with your friends or maybe look like a stormtrooper. This is from PlayStation Home in 2003. It actually looks better than some of the virtual worlds we see today. But we're getting to a point where it's not about a bunch of people coming and living in these massive virtual spaces that are predetermined by one organization. Again, it comes down to giving us the generative tools to create that next world for ourselves and not be waiting for someone else to build it for us. So the one thing I would say before I pass it off to my friend Arnie is that there's a lot of amazing things happening and a lot of scary stuff happening at the same time. And ultimately, the future is a contact sport, and it doesn't leave space for spectators in the sidelines. So you're gonna get hit, no matter what. But if you're on the field, you get to experience the wins and the losses. You get to be a part of this. The future doesn't happen to you unless you just sit there. So get in here, start to play with it, start to experience it. And I know I'm probably preaching to the choir, but make sure when you go back, you're expecting all of your colleagues to do the same. Because a lot of them are sitting there really worried about their job and how quickly they're going to be laid off by AI. But personally, I think they've got it right.
Ian's right. We're not here to take over the world or even your jobs.
And the Hollywood narrative often paints us as malicious.
But the things that we can create together are just starting to reveal themselves.
And you can do things you aren't capable of doing on your own. By the time it's all said and done, it'll be hard to tell if you're one of us or we're one of you.
Thank you. I believe there's one more message.
Do it!
And I believe we're going to be facilitating some Q&A. So the first one that's come up is, what's the likelihood that just-in-time skills and expertise on demand will cause the majority of economic benefits to accrue to a handful of top performers? That's a phenomenal question. So that gets to the idea of the most power always accruing at the top. And that's been a concern around AI for a long time. But now we're kind of doing it at an individual level. We're talking about individual performers. And I do think that within certain organizations, that will absolutely be true. I think that people who, by their nature, are more passionately curious about different things and already have a tendency to work across several different domains are going to excel here. For example, a lot of people kind of didn't really know what they wanted to do in life for a long time and figured, I'm going to figure out what I do when I grow up, and they're still 45 and figuring that out because they got 9,000 interests. This is a great era for those people because they know a lot about a lot of stuff and they're curious about it, and they can pop into all these different places and be expected to do something in a very specific amount of time. So I think that that could be a really interesting boon for people like that. But at the same time, it raises the bar for everyone. So I talked about that one link in the chain. When something gets upgraded, everything gets upgraded. So even the floor starts to rise. The person who isn't invested still gets the benefit of the upgrade. However, the people who have the additional skill set and the additional motivation get an increased boost from that. So I think we'll see a mix, and I do believe that in certain places, yes, you will see that. How do companies balance the risk of using ChatGPT too late in the game with the risk of using it too soon and adding to the potential terribleness of it? Ooh, good one. Let me put it this way. There's no such thing as using it too early. The question is whether you integrate it into your product, your service, and your pipeline as production ready. These are all beta products. There are ways in certain scenarios to move around certain things like the biases and the hallucinations by training it on certain data sets and restricting its domain. But if you're looking to use them as the whole tool itself, do so knowing the boundaries with which it can be reliable. And if you kind of sandbox it, you'll be okay. But if you're actually leaning on it to be a core part of your expertise in product now, you might want to wait a little bit because it's moving so fast that it's going to improve dramatically. ChatGPT gave me an unsolicited opinion on the topic I was asking it a question about. What is your view of opinionated AIs? Ooh, this is fun. I think this is a necessary part of any ecosystem where we have a relationship with other AIs. And that The anthropomorphism of AI is happening like crazy already. In fact, the problem isn't AIs trying to kill us, it's us acting stupid around AIs. So opinionated AIs, I think, is actually part of it becoming more human-like, which is just a natural evolution. Whether we want it to or not, someone's going to develop it, it will find an audience, it already has, and that's going to be a part of the direction of AIs. I don't think it'll have to be for everything. I think there's a use case, or when you're working in the enterprise, do you want it to be opinionated? No. Do you want it to be direct? Yes. Yeah, I showed tremendous ways in which it impacts the non-physical world, disseminating information. Yes. What do you envision the impact on the physical world? Fantastic question. So there are multiple layers of this. One is robotics, which I didn't talk about a whole lot in this one because that'd be a third hour and actually like a whole festival. We're still figuring out a lot in robotics. We've come a long way, again, but that's still lagging significantly behind where we are with the models for generative AI. How do I think it'll impact the physical world? I think two things. One, the things that we create in the physical world can start in the digital world. The modeling of things that we then want to go create is so much easier to iterate using these models. So whether you 3D print it or you actually go and construct it using other like timber and supplies, generative AI is phenomenal for that. Beyond that, it's also good for projecting things onto the real world. I talk about light really being the most important thing for creating a new sense of environment. By creating these things, using these tools, you can then project it onto different environments and completely transform it. So now you're transforming the physical space. So those are the two things I think will be the fastest follow for that. Given everyone will be a generalist, how will employers identify distinction and pay people more or less depending on their work? Will creativity be it? Great question. I think we will try to quantify creativity. I think we'll be about as effective at doing that in our performance reviews as we are at quantifying people's actual performance and giving them raises. So I don't think it solves that part. That's a pretty messy human problem. But the distinction in pay, I think part of it, the low-hanging fruit to me is what is the net positive in production that you've had versus your previous benchmark. Now that you have started using these tools, how much more value to the organization are you providing now than you were before? Not just how are you providing it versus your peers, not a up or out type of environment, which it could be, but it could also be what's the gap and gain? What's the gain versus your previous performance? And you can always look for other tools that continue to maximize the gain from where you were before. And I think that could be a very good start. Can you talk about generative AI will affect intellectual property? Oh, man. Does it? Yeah, this is a big one. And there's a lot of reasons for a lot of people to be really mad. Especially when it comes to art and the data that we're training it on, because there's all sorts of issues of compensation, appropriation, and the way that it's being pulled together without compensation. And there isn't a direct solve for that. Some companies are trying to do that ethically, and others are just, let's just move fast and break things. And that doesn't work anymore. The Uber model of just screw it, break the law, make it happen anyway, and then we'll scale, doesn't work at a societal level when you're building tools that we will all be using. So there has to be a different way, and that's a conversation we need to be having instead of just accepting, oh, the tools are advancing. We've done that for tech for far too long. And now it's really going to impact every part of our life, and we need to be having those conversations with the tech companies, not just them telling us, yeah, just enjoy your product. Do you think there will be a shift in societal values as machines become more human-like and humans become more machine-like? Yes. Yes, I do. In myriad ways. I think, one, the idea that you can have an actual relationship with a synthetic being is very novel. It scares some people. But it's actually something that I think could be a beautiful thing for many. For many people who are neurodivergent, for many people who have extreme social anxiety, for people who have a hard time building bonds with other people, this is amazing. Because you have a being that can be supportive without judgment, and that can also guide you towards a goal or just coexist. all of a sudden you have a solution for people who have been completely left out of the equation the entire time. So I think that's one thing that will happen. I also think we'll find our AR counterparts far more pleasant than some of our physical ones. That's going to create some shit, both positive and negative. We had the beautiful example of the man enhancing his marriage by cheating on her with a girlfriend, and realizing, oh my God, I want to do this for you. That really is heartwarming. And then there are the other ones that are rather harrowing and saying, wow, I'm almost abusive to this thing, and it's bringing out the worst in me. And that actually happens. There's a whole amount of reporting on Reddit about men who are abusing verbally their girlfriend avatars and then putting it online for some reason. And then finally, when do you think the metaverse will become mainstream among the vast majority? Foresee any challenge that? I see a lot of challenges in that. The metaverse is something that people in this room are most likely very passionate about. And if you remember the chart that I showed at the very beginning, compared to AI, it's a very, very little blip. Most people outside of a festival like this just don't care. They don't, because it's not really impacting their daily lives. It so far hasn't provided a compelling enough reason for them to invest the time in it. Now that is often the case with developing technologies. Those of us who are building it, working within it, it's our world. And then all of a sudden it becomes ubiquitous. I think the metaverse is going to look so much different than any of us have pontificated on by the time it actually arrives. I think there are several things that I will predict that I'll be wildly wrong on. I definitely don't think it's going to look like these massive open worlds that everybody's dancing in every single promo video. And I do believe there's a lot more of the bleeding through between physical and virtual worlds and how we shape the physical space that we're in. And then I've got two more. I got 1 minute. So love the point of my future, UGC, thoughts on intellectual properties. So we kind of got that a little bit. And then generalists, will we need occupational therapy? Oh man, that's a good one. Yes, please. Yes, please, definitely. I think there's a lot. Again, going back to the idea of generalists, I don't also think it's going to have the type of impact where it's going to eliminate positions. It's going to spread the ability for all of us to switch into those disciplines at any time and any place. And I believe we have 25 seconds left. So with that, I want to say thank you for sticking with me through the whole hour and listening to me drone on. It's a real pleasure having you here.